Now we're back for part 3 of Hegel. Man, there's a lot to say about Hegel. Probably because he's so complicated that I have to say more in order to explain what the heck Hegel's talking about. Plus, I mean, not that I typically reveal my bias and so forth, but I think all of 21st century everything ties back in some way to Hegel. I think Hegel's the seminal figure here. Kant combines Plato and Aristotle, that's nice, but Hegel really is the philosopher of the future, because he then leads to Heidegger, and I already talked about how Heidegger kind of sets the scene for most of 21st century everything. Not to say Hegel's completely right about everything, but I think that what he is talking about kind of becomes the basis for a lot of other stuff. Hegel's the one who, it was his lectures that Schopenhauer was trying to compete with and failing miserably, and we saw how that turned out for Schopenhauer. Right? So Hegel had this massive influence, even in his own day, upon the thinking of Western Europe, and look how influential Western Europe is on a worldwide scale. So, talked about this understanding, the umbrella, consciousness itself, thinking itself, the mind itself, is really this third stage here. Thinking about thinking. We move on to this fourth stage then, this self-awareness. And here, like we talked about with Heidegger, it's difficult to define this thing. It's difficult to define self, even though that's your journal for this week, who are you? Difficult to define self, difficult to define awareness. And it's really difficult when you combine those two things together. What the heck does that look like? What's that mean? So here's Hegel's attempt to tell us, kind of generally speaking, what that means. This is page 48, so just above the last paragraph. The inherent being is consciousness, yet it is still just as much that for which the other, which it is in itself is. And it is for consciousness that the inherent nature of the object and its being for another are one and the same. Ego is the content of the relation, and itself the process of relating. So it's both the object and the relation, both and. So who I am is both me, but it's also me in relations to others. It is ego itself which is opposed to another, and at the same time reaches out beyond this other. With self-consciousness, we have now reached the native land of truth. Into that kingdom where it is at home. We have to see how the form or attitude of self-consciousness in the first instance appears. When we consider this new form of and type of knowledge, again, it should be called knowledge old and new, this new form of and type of knowledge, the knowledge of self in its relation to that which preceded, namely the knowledge of another. Let me stop there. Alright, so self-awareness is in part this realization that we are reflections of the absolute. Okay. It's also our relations with others. Okay. It's also our relation with previous versions of ourselves, because that's also another other. We're aufhebening ourselves. We are coming along ourselves. There's a previous version of me that is sort of like me, but not completely like me. We've talked about this before with regards to Heidegger and why he never apologized for being a Nazi. Right, but there are previous versions of me that are sort of me, but also not me. And so we bring along aspects of that into the me of now. The me of the future will have aspects of this me, but there will be aspects of this me that get left behind because they're flawed. So we're all ourselves progressing as well. That's what individual progress looks like. Some people call it maturing, right? Hegel's talking about the same thing here. New form of and type of knowledge, the knowledge of self, in its relation to that which preceded. Previous versions of self, as well as previous versions of history, as well as previous things that have occurred in the past. We find indeed that the latter has vanished, this another has vanished, but that its moments have at the same time been preserved. He goes on talking about moments again later. There are no longer present as substantial elements, but as moments of self-consciousness. So, one of the questions, and this is a question that really all transcendent tales have as an open question that some address and some don't. Whether that's Plato's tale or Buddhist Great Awakening. And what is the Buddhist Great Awakening? Well, it's great compassion. Why? Because you realize there's not that big of a difference between you and me. The distinction between subject and other subject gets very, very blurry. So of course I have a different level of compassion for you because you're also sort of me, and I'm also sort of you. That's what we become awakened to. The real sad part is that Hegel didn't recognize that connection with Buddhism. He actually spoke out against Buddhism, which, there again, maybe that's why Schopenhauer loved it so much, because he hated Hegel, I don't know. But he thinks that Hegel thinks you have to do this, you have to transcend this way. And he thinks that Buddhism is trying to swoop in from the outside to here, without going through these other steps. And he thinks these other steps are necessary. They're trying to do the awakening without the work. Okay, maybe, whatever. Anyway, so Buddhism struggles with this, Hegel struggles with this. And we talked about it with Heidegger too, it's unclear, once you have this awakening, is everything now different from that moment on? You're just a completely different being now? That this self-awareness is an all-the-time thing? Or is it moments? Where like you just kind of live your life and then, oh wow, you have another awakened moment. Oh, that's right, there's not that big a difference between you and me, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of slip back into this. And then, oh yeah, moment, and slip. Moment, slip. Moment, slip. It also gives you a different perspective over everything. Because look how close this is to the perspective of the absolute. You're seeing the world differently. So imagine if you will, the classroom that we once met in. Ah, the good old days. And so if you remember the classroom, on the floor it was a tile floor. And so there were individual tile. Now the closer you got, the more you could see that they were individual tile. But if we would have taken all the tables and chairs out and put them in the hallway, and then taken the roof off of the building, and looked at the floor from a helicopter, we wouldn't have been able to see the distinctions between each individual tile. It would have looked like one big tile instead. That's sort of what's going on here, right? So from our little perspective down here, we can see, oh look, everybody's different. But if you're looking at it from the Absolute's perspective, whoa, look, people are basically the same. That these individual tiles really kind of become one big tile. Because the Absolute's just trying to look at everything to learn more about itself anyway. It's not really concerned about each individual tile. Again, this is not God, this is the Absolute. Those concepts of God, at least in the Western tradition, and somewhat in the Eastern tradition as well, are concerned about each one of us and blah, blah, blah. The Absolute doesn't care about us. The Absolute cares about itself. This is not a healthy relationship, right, between the Absolute and us. The Absolute's all take, and no give. But once we become more self-aware, we'll be able to see things from a broader perspective, more from the helicopter point of view than from the individual tile point of view. Oh yeah, subjects, objects, not that different. Subjects, not that different. Again, I don't know if that's moments or if it's, wow, all the time now. And heck, since it's Hegel, it's probably and both, because everything's and both for Hegel. So Hegel emphasizes others. Hegel also sort of lays the groundwork for theories about like the singularity and so on and so forth, or that we're all just computer programs, right? All of that stuff is really kind of built on what Hegel's talking about here. Let's see, is there anything else I want to talk about with regard? I mean, there's so much to talk about with Hegel, but I think I've covered what I want to cover. Oh, it is interesting too. Like when we think about animals or technology or something along those lines, it seems that we want to draw a great distinction between those things being self-aware or not, right? Wow, computers, maybe they're here, or I don't know, maybe they're some funky place here, but they're not self-aware yet. Right? So we get things like the Turing test, which is basically a test of self-awareness. Right? If we ask a computer a question and ask someone sitting in a computer a question and can't tell the difference in response to know which one's the actual person, then maybe the computer's like a person now. Maybe they've reached a level of self-awareness. So I think I've mentioned this before too. Years and years ago, because philosophy tends to attract smart Alex, someone asked Siri, asked their phone, why? And Siri said, I don't know, perhaps you should take a philosophy class. But just a couple years ago then, another student asked Siri, updated version of Siri, why? Siri said, I don't know, I often wonder that myself. Siri's wondering stuff. Is that an indication of self-awareness? Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Caesar, the ape, the pivotal scene, his first words that he utters, no. Seems to be an indication of self-awareness, like thinking about the terrible twos of childhood development. A whole lot of no. I don't want to take a bath. I don't want to eat my broccoli. I don't want to. What is it? It's self-awareness. I don't want to do this thing. And you can't make me because you are not me. I'm my own thing. Animals. I mean, we do eat cows and pigs and chickens. We, at least in the United States, typically don't eat dogs or cats. Some research indicates that dogs can experience depression in the same way that humans do. And typically the ones that experience this depression are the ones that have been retired. Retired canine dogs, retired dog sniffing dogs. They have no purpose anymore. That may seem to indicate some type of self-awareness. Dolphins recognize themselves in mirrors. Elephants mourn the dead. All these funky things about animals, I wonder, do they point to what we would consider to be aspects of self-awareness? Such that, wow, if dogs can be depressed, they're a lot like us, maybe we shouldn't eat them. Boy, if elephants mourn the dead, so do we, so maybe we shouldn't eat them. If dolphins recognize themselves in mirrors, and so do we, then maybe we shouldn't eat them. Interesting things to consider. So we're talking about self-awareness, we're really talking about things like personhood and who counts and who doesn't. Think about biomedical ethics. Not that this is an ethics class, I get way more into detail in there. But think about biomedical ethics, right? If someone's brain dead, they no longer have the capacity to do this or this. Even if they could do this, they couldn't understand what they're sensing anyway. We call them vegetables instead of Uncle Joe. If they're not capable of this, no brain waves, no brain activity, and they continue to be self-aware. If we talk about beginning of life stuff, heartbeats, okay, that's nice. Other people have wanted to talk about viability, whatever that means. The moment of quickening and whatnot. I wonder how much of it comes back to self-awareness. Interesting things to think about. So I'll go ahead and end part 3 here, because I've talked far too long probably about Hegel. But please, I'll post so I'll send an email with the links when they're ready, and I'll also put them on the discussion board for Hegel, and then comment on the discussion board in the forum thing, or whatever you want to call it. Then a reminder that you've got to comment, ask question, do something so I know that you're still out there, so that I know that you're still participating in the class, so I know that you're still actively in the class, because they're still asking me to take attendance and all of that stuff for financial reasons. We've come this far. Let's not even though we're in funky circumstances, we've only got a few weeks left. Okay, so keep on keeping on. Oh yeah, go ahead and read the Hegel for next time. This will probably be the lesson for today, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll probably post something new on Monday. The new thing for Monday will probably be Rudolf Carnap and Edmund Gettier. So if you're feeling super bored or super ambitious, sometimes those two are the same thing. The Carnap is page 121 in part 2, the elimination of metaphysics, and Carnap's going to be building on what Hume did, but taking Hume one step further to Carnap thinks, hopefully, completely eliminate metaphysics entirely. And then from there, then we'll go on to Edmund Gettier, page 60. And they're both in the analytic tradition. So we've got a continental thinker here. We'll be looking at the analytic tradition. Then from there, we'll probably do Dewey finally to show the American perspective. Then we'll take it from there. Stay safe.